Good evening to one and all. I welcome all invited panelists and guests to the online panel discussion on design education, organized by Faculty of Design, Manipal University Jaipur, in collaboration with DST Rajasthan and Design Cohort. I would like to take this opportunity to introduce to the moderator of today's event, Dr. Anuradha Chatterjee. Professor Dr. Anuradha Chatterjee is the Dean, Faculty of Design, Manipal University Jaipur. Dr. Chatterjee is a registered architect in India. For close to 2 decades, she has taught at and has held leadership positions in premier higher education, architecture and design schools in Australia, China, and India. Dr. Chatterjee was the first Dean Academics at Avni Institute of Design, where she was responsible for institution building and establishing culture and systems for academic excellence. Dr. Chatterjee is an accomplished scholar who has published 3 books with international academic presses. She is working on her 4th book as the area editor for Asia for the prestigious publication Bloomsbury Global Encyclopedia of Women in Architecture, 1960 to 2015, with 22 countries like India, China, Pakistan, Singapore, Hong Kong, Vietnam, Mongolia, Taiwan, and many others under her purview. I request Professor Dr. Anuradha Chatterjee to start with the panel discussion. Over to Dr. Anuradha.
Thank you, Dr. Madhura, for joining us. So we are going to be having a panel discussion on design and education. The panel will consider design as a field which is everywhere but still needs a lot of introduction. Our discussions are going to revisit why India needs more designers or what is design field of contribution. It will focus on design education with respect to design thinkers, institutions and critical approaches, pedagogical approaches. It will also focus on what consequences secondary education, for instance, national education policy might have in design education and design education. The panel will consider collectively what are the critical objectives of education and whether those are ever in alignment with the objectives of design education. So in starting the proceedings this afternoon, I'm going to be introducing the speakers. So the first speaker that we have is Professor Srivathsan, is an architect and urban designer and currently Director, Center for Research on Architecture and Urbanism, CEPT University Ahmedabad. He was previously the academic director of the university. He taught for a decade in Chennai and worked for about 8 years as a senior journalist with The Hindu. His research and writings include planning, contemporary practices, and art education. Professor Srivathsan has recently co-edited a book titled The Contemporary Hindu Temple, Fragments for a History. So thank you for joining us, Professor Srivathsan. We also have with us Professor Badrinarayanan. Dr. Badrinarayanan is trained as in the industry for 10 years before setting up a multidisciplinary design practice. He has been involved in academics for 30 years and has a PG certificate in higher education from Nottingham Trent University and a PhD in architectural education from School of Planning and Architecture. Since joining the Department of Interior Design and in 2010, he has taken the lead in curriculum development and pedagogy. He likes to think and write about critical connections between theory and practice, arts and sciences, philosophy, and everyday. Recently, he has been leading interdisciplinary modules that bring together interior design, product design, community. Thank you for being with us, Badri. Professor Geeta Narayanan is also with us. She is the founder director of Srishti Institute of Art, Design and Technology, Bangalore. And she's an educator with over 50 years of experience in education, ranging across fields of education, arts and culture, design and technology. Geeta has moved from founding institutions that support and enable change to working both creatively and constructively in generating capacities for change within teachers, artists, and other creative practitioners. Professor Geeta was awarded an honorary doctorate by Oxford of her contribution to teacher development in 2011. She has accepted a Director's Fellowship at the Media Lab of Massachusetts Institute of Technology, USA, and is currently holding the position of the UNESCO Chair of Culture, Habitat, and Sustainable Development at Srishti. Thank you for being with us, Professor Geeta. We have with us the President of Manipal University Jaipur, Professor G.K.Prabhu. Thank you for being with us. He has been associated with the Manipal Group for over 2 decades in various academic and leadership positions. Dr. Prabhu has obtained his bachelor's degree in Electronics and Communication Engineering Devanagari Mysore University, his MTech degree in Biomedical Engineering from Manipal Institute of Technology, with first rank from Mangalore University, and his PhD is from IIT Madras. He joined the MIT as a lecturer in the Department of Electronics and Communication Engineering. Since then, he has served the institute in various capacities, such as head of the Department of Biomedical Engineering, Associate Director for Research and Development, and Director of MIT. He has also served as Deputy Registrar Technical and Registrar and Pro-Vice of Higher Education, deemed university. Thank you for being with us, Dr. Prabhu. Ms. Mugdha Sinha, who's sort of the creator of this Design Cohort and Design Conclave, IAS Secretary to Department of Science and Technology. His career as a civil servant spans 20 years of wide-ranging experience in governance, policy making, and international trade negotiations. She has worked in the ministries of textiles, industry, and commerce, both at the center and in her Kedar state of Rajasthan, and consumer affairs. She is an alumna of LSR, JNU, and University of Berkeley, California, USA. She's also the recipient of the Ford Foundation Scholarship, the Junior Scholarship, and the Madhura Yadav Award for Best Student in History and Principles, prize for promoting academic being with us, Mugdhaji. Professor Pradyumna Vyas is also with us. Professor Pradyumna Vyas was a former director of National Institute of Design, India's premier design institute. He is currently a senior advisor of design promotion and innovation at Confederation of Indian Industry, Premier Industry Association, and a board of director of the World Design Organization. With more than 36 years of professional and teaching experience in different spheres of design, Professor Vyas has been associated with NID for 30 years, first as faculty member and later on as a director of the institute. 2019. In 2019, he was awarded the honor of Good Fellow by the Japan Institute of Design Promotion, Tokyo. His most recent accomplishments include being appointed as a distinguished professor of Shanghai Academy of Fine Arts in China, and being awarded the honor of Good Fellow by the Japan Institute of Design Promotion. Thank you for being with us today, Professor Vyas. Professor Sanjay Srivastava is also with us. Professor Sanjay has 25 years of progressive responsibility and operational leadership experience in India's top academic in fashion design, management, and technology at NIFT. He is a director of NIFT Patna since 23rd of Jan 2013, and he has held additional charge of NIFT Bhubaneswar as well from Feb 2017 for a period of 2 years. Professor Srivastava has played an important role on campus before making his forays into NIFT administration. He has contributed immensely to the growth of NIFT Hyderabad as one of the founder faculty members. His journey with NIFT Hyderabad started in August 1996, and he went on from being an assistant professor to design department in 2013. He was a founder faculty member at NIFT Patna. His leadership at NIFT Patna has made it to the number 4 in all India top fashion imparting institutions in 2020. So thank you all for being with us. We are incredibly grateful and discussion, and thank you for bearing with us with all the background noise and all the glitches that the online, the virtual environment brings with it. So in starting the proceedings today, I would be very honored if each of the speakers could speak for about a couple of minutes, 2 to 3 minutes, on what they imagine is on design. I will invite Professor Srivathsan to kindly start.
Good evening, and I'm quite happy to be part of this panel, and everyone has extremely rich experience. What I'm going to share today is not a manifesto, but broadly my concerns, and I would look at the meta issues and probably discuss the specificities in conversation. What I'm going to share today is primarily drawn from my work and experience in architectural education, but I'm sure it will find some resonance in other domains of design. Some of these concerns I've addressed as an individual tutor and also as the academic director at CEPT. To me, my major concern is increasingly design education, particularly architecture, suffers false binaries such as academics versus practice, pragmatic versus critical thinking, art versus school practice, basics and specialist skills, and so on. These binaries have been stifling, distractive, holding us back from pitching a bigger and a better tent. More importantly to me, it has affected the way we have dealt with what Terry Winograd, the renowned professor of computer science, called 5 decades ago, the ability to address the complexity barrier. Let me explain this briefly. Design practice is messy and multiple demands are made on design. Practice regularly negotiates with the clients, deals with contingencies, whereas pragmatism imposed by resources with the drive to innovate. It bears in mind the economic consideration and yet tries to be socially responsive. How do we learn and engage with these complexities and work with them for better is the essential education challenge. Indeed, these complexities are not new. Educators have faced them before and have handled them in two ways. Some have tried to control or break the complexities using simpler modular ways of representing knowledge. As Winograd will explain, each module of learning then is independently and incrementally developed. The process of training that followed was divided into separate phases, and the student was expected to get a sense of the complexities of the real world through limited interactions. What started as a useful and a convenient method, with the years became our paradigm of the world, just correctly as Kuhn cautioned us that we may end up doing. Academia became a world in itself, with self-referential rituals and protocols. It even began to believe that it will be the bedrock of innovation as long as it stays away from the corrupt world of practice, thus further encouraging the binary of academic and profession in its favor. It advocated resistance over alignment with practice. A few others reacted to this complexity barrier differently. To borrow Winograd's phrase again, they emphasized the mystical hope that students would somehow learn things we don't have to tell them. The dream was that we can start with a minimum structure, then provide experience to build connections with complexity. By believing that since all the learning and relationships are happening in the student's mind, the outcome need not be an accurate indicator of evidence of learning, but the processes. In this manner, at times we romanticize incompleteness and not demanding that it has to lead to actionable thoughts. Employability often was not an easy. If in the first truth, we lost the purpose for method, in the second, we mistook complacency for flexibility, and anything goes for criticality. Institutions that separate education and professional practice produces a fictionless account of the discipline. It hardly trains students to negotiate, collaborate, and often look down upon it, or ignore real-world problems. Teachers and students start to believe that the objectives of education and profession are widely varied and cannot be reconciled. But this is not true, isn't it? As studies have repeatedly shown, there's a lot of convergence between institutional goals and professional standards. Critical thinking, problem solving, communication, collaboration have been the core values of professional education and as well as practice. To me then, the full challenge of design education is to revisit Winograd's question. So I have 4 propositions to make. First is to pitch the tent wider, make academia a place of diverse orientation practice. Second, to teach problem solving as a messy exercise, which cannot be free from their political and economic conditions. Third, create a learning environment that goes beyond binaries, enable students to imagine and develop themselves as artists or entrepreneurs without thinking the difference is a moral failure. Instead, create the condition or conditions to develop a sensitive understanding of the roles they enter. Finally, experiment with an academic structure that offers both structured connections, local modularity, and speculative possible. Thank you.
Dr. Srivathsan, thank you so much. Professor Badri, if you can hear us and are able to speak for a few minutes on your position, that would be great. Professor Badrinarayanan, are you there? Dr. Madhura, is Professor Badri there?
Yeah, he's there, but he's not. Yeah, he's there now. Yeah, he's there. Hi. Sir, unmute, Dr. Badri, unmute yourself. Ah. Yes, you can speak. Dr. Badri.
We can see you.
Okay, I totally missed all that happened in the last 5 minutes. I did not have weapons, so I had to install it. Okay, I would like to share a presentation. Can you please take me through how to do that? How do I share my screen?
I think there are. I have already given it to DST also. I'll just ask to share. Or.
Badri, maybe I come back to you after the next speaker. Professor Geeta Narayanan would be very happy if you could speak for a few minutes on your position, please.
Thank you, Anuradha. Thank you, and Prabhu. Can you hear me? Is my voice audible?
Yes, yes.
Okay. I'm, somebody who has looking at design education with more of a rear view mirror right now than looking at it in the front. And one of the biggest battles that design education has been in the private sector, where if you are not part of a national institute or the Indian Institute of Technology, design has not really got a place in the regulatory framework of this country. So when we are talking about design education, architecture, and I agree with everything Professor Srivathsan just spoke about complexity, the need for allowing that kind of dimensionality of not frivolity, but intense rigor and criticality and process and practice to engage in this field of professional education. But somehow design education has kind of missed the bus on many fronts. So I want to put that position first before I go to what we could actually think about in terms of more curriculum or pedagogical terms, because I think the regulatory framework is important with the number of private institutions and universities which are offering design. Currently, the new national education policy, and I speak as a member of the task, specially invited to the task force for the implementation of the NEP in Karnataka, and a member of the current vision group on this, is design is omitted in any tangible or specific terms in the national education policy. Right? Yeah, there is only one mention of the word design, and it is the word design thinking. And it is only in a place where design thinking must be encouraged in all programs of study. If you take that to the point that Professor Srivathsan made just now, it makes a mockery of anything he said, which is about the rigor, about the fourfold process and things like that. It just becomes like a vaccine or an inoculation that is given to people in whichever field, and it is not a serious discipline or a need to study it professionally. I will argue, and I have been arguing substantially over the last 3 or 4 decades, that both the UGC and AICT do not pay sufficient interest or attention to design, and that as a result of which it is really in a danger of everybody calling anything that comes under the realm of creative activity design. It is really not to do Indian design any help if we don't clearly argue that it is the role of regulators to permit and allow design as an academic discipline which has a serious position in the knowledge spectrum of our country, and not just say that it's something that is allowed at the peripheral somewhat of what we all take seriously, so seriously here today. I have no idea why the National Education Policy 2020 has an omission of design, but I do think it is necessary for us to take that into account. And secondly, there is an even greater battle brewing. I mean, I don't know what the future of the UGC and AICT are in these, but these regulatory battles are going on between them. So I think that if we are going to talk about design education, we have to talk about it in the context of the national education policy. We cannot talk about it just in a self-serving manner of academics talking and preaching about the curriculum and so on. Because in the end, no matter what we say, if there are, and Pradyumna and I are on the World Design Organization, I'm a regional advisor, he's on the board. We know there are 42 new universities offering design and design education in India. We know what the WhatsApp groups, how large the WhatsApp groups are. But then what is the quality of design education? What constitutes design education? We have great centers, School of Planning and Architecture, CEPT University. Architecture at least has been able to hold its own, and the Supreme Court has now taken it out of AICTE. But that's not so with design. And so it is my argument at this time that if we are talking about design education, it is imperative that the design education community in India collectively make a representation for its omission in the national education policy, and that if it is a disciplinary knowledge body in itself, then that must be recognized, because we are trying to do many things here. With that, I will leave that position and I will move to a more pedagogical and academic position. Earlier last year, and in November, when I was addressing education and research at a conference under the auspices of the WDO and the government of Telangana, we all discussed together the kind of ages of design education, starting perhaps historically with the way the industrial movement in India, the industrialization of India post-independence, and the need for engineering and other fields of technical education to be enhanced through design. But that was really a brick and mortar exercise on which we built this thing that the industrial mechanisms of our country will be enhanced through design. There was a small movement at the peripheral structure of Gandhian economics, of artisanal livelihoods and things like that. Then later on, we saw that the mechanization of that period of India then led very quickly to the birth of the digital technologies, and India went leapfrogging into digital technologies. And both the digitization and the informationalization, which were again revolutions coming out of science, technology, electronics, and so on, led us in design to move into newer fields of interaction, of user interfaces, and even in architecture of smart cities, and looking at things in a very different way, knowing that the electromagnetic spectrum, if you like, which has become a commercial commodity, will allow us to define newer fields and scopes of design and their employability, therefore. But it did nothing for the knowledge discipline of design in itself. The knowledge discipline. And again, architecture has built that. So I would like to keep, because I've got people from architecture here, architectural in this country has built it, but we have not built it in other design education fields through doctoral programs, through other kinds of engagement. And then when you leave informationization behind, and now we are in a post-pandemic world, and we are in a post-climate change, and we are really at a more point of civilizational and ecological crisis. We're also at that point where technology is saying that what can artificial intelligence or robotics or a new kind of mechanization to design, and where does design education come in? So it is my argument to all of you that in many ways we have to decolonize design. We have to remove it from these hierarchical parameters that we have stuck ourselves into. We really have to ask ourselves some fundamental questions about our regulators. We cannot watch and have the quality of Indian design fall because our regulators, like the AICT, are looking at more the size of the rooms or the number of computers and not the quality of the academic program that is actually running. I think that there is a role for forums such as this to build a valuable proposition, to engage now when the policy has just come out with it in substantial terms and ask some very powerful questions. And that must come from a collective of design educators. I may not be part of that anymore. My 5 decades is over. But you're all there, and I urge you to stand up and do something about it. Because if you don't, you will watch the last 5 decades and the work that has happened, very valuable work in building design in India. National Institute of Design, National Institute of Fashion Technology, School of Planning and Architecture, CEPT University, so many premium institutes, IIT, IDC. But if you don't have a recognition of the discipline, what are we doing in design education? Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Geeta. Could we come back to Dr. Badri? If you're ready to speak.
Yes.
Now.
Yes. Thank you. Yes. Thank you, Dr. Anuradha. Thank you, Dr. Madhura, and eminent panelists. My perspective is more from the ground level because, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. My perspective is more from the ground level because I've been involved with active teaching, pedagogy, and as I see it, design education is fraught with many tensions and debates and discourses. I have personally encountered them in the last 30 years that I've been teaching, and I would like to try and structure those debates along 3 lines of tension. And if one can please open the presentation. So the first is about how we define the territory or the domain of design, and whether those contents that we teach, should they be integrated or should they be fragmentary? And these are 2 totally opposing forces that I have come across. So there is a debate towards generalization. We need more generalists. There is another debate which says there is super specialization. Communication is becoming things like UX, UI, and animation, and this and that, and so on. So there is this debate about generalization, specialization, and what kind of curricula should we have? Curricula or a mix of general plus specialized curricula, so that you have a competence which is balanced between the 2. Then should it be specific to discipline or should it be multi, transdisciplinary in nature? So we are still trying to define what the curricula and the contents of the curricula should be. Should it be all about teamwork? Should we prepare students towards teamwork, or should we encourage these label kind of designers who like prima donnas there seems to be space in the industry for both. Should we produce more design managers in the future, or should we produce more design producers who are like virtuoso players in an orchestra? Then the next debate is about the delivery of the education. Should it be more individualized, customized? Should it be more standardized? This is a debate. So there are many institutions who are taking different divergent paths on this. It's all about, we need to produce so many, whatever, thousands and thousands of designers in the future. Can we really do that using individualized, customized pedagogical systems? Or do we really need a kind of a, it's a quality versus quantity kind of a debate. We need to produce them in very large numbers with some basic minimum competence. Then, does the pedagogy encourage high average competence, or does it only encourage a few genius here and there? This is a very strong debate. Should we, go back to the master apprentice model or a mentorship kind of a model in pedagogy, or should we have this mass industrial model where one teacher teaches many through efficient means? Should education be led by the industry? Should the industry dictate what is to be taught? And should education stay current with what is demand in the job market? Or should education be more visionary? And should it produce people who are capable of leading the industry? This is another kind of a debate. So these are all sub-questions within the overall larger question of should the delivery be individualized versus standardized? Should it be through human contact? Should it be automated? These are two, again, forces. But underlying both the contents and the delivery is our value system. And to me, the value system seems to be kind of polarized between should it be humanistic or should it be technocratic? In the sense, should we believe that technology is going to solve all human problems, that we need to dominate over nature, we need to manipulate nature, or do we see external problems as kind of springing from the psyche of the human being, and it's the human being who needs to be treated, healed, need to be kind of sane, and the environment will kind of fall into place by itself. So these are the two approaches, essentially Cartesian, divide of the mind and the body versus the more non-dualistic view of the self or the body and the environment, which is what Eastern philosophy is all about. So under this, you have the human-centric versus system-centric design. Should it be physical, tangible, experiential versus digital, virtual, remote? Should it be local versus global, holistic versus atomistic? Should it be empowering or should it be manipulative? Should it be preventive? Should it be curative? Etc., etc. So I have tried to kind of summarize these three major lines of forces into this diagram, where on one x-axis I have the fragmentary forces of education, and then you have the integrative forces pulling in opposite directions. On the other axis, we have an individualized delivery, and which is pulling in the other direction from the standardized mode of delivery. This is on the y-axis. On the z-axis, we have technocratic in the bottom, which is pulling away from the humanistic value systems. Now, very interestingly, if I look at the bottom, this is the product of the Industrial Revolution. And the entire paradigm kind of seems to stem from this. And this is going to go on, I think, for a while now. All our AI and automated are all coming from here. On top, we have more of the pre-industrial value system. And there seems to be kind of tussle between these two. As of now, the trend seems to be everybody wants to back basics. Now, whether these are really positive processes or are they dialectic office courses kind of includes the depending on the, should there be some kind of education, some kind of a magical solution between the two? Is what remains to be seen. I'm through.
Padri, can we move on, or you have something to add?
No, that's it.
Great. Dr. Prabhu, you can address. I'd like you to speak next, please.
So, good evening, Dr. Anuradha, Dr. Madhura, and all the panelists. And it is also an opportunity and is a pleasure for me to be a part of this discussion. And yes, I come from an engineering background, specialized in biomedical engineering. So slightly, some of my examples are more towards the industrial design and maybe sometime product design. So for me, the design is basically a problem solving. So from that angle that I just start, and there is one thing that which I learned during my study, and that one incident that I will share with you. And when I went for an biomedical engineering, so I started designing one instrument or one apparatus. So just you look from the doctor's point of view or the health workers, and they usually have this stethoscope. You might have seen this stethoscope they wear, and usually that stethoscope, it captures the heart sound. And heart has a very peculiar standard way of producing those sounds, and doctors and health workers are competent enough to understand those sounds and make some kind of a diagnosis. So it is a very old kind of a technology. The stethoscope, what you have it, of course, the look and feel has been changed, but the technology which is used is a very, very old. And coming out from an engineering background, and that too from the electronics and communication engineering, and now going towards the biomedical engineering. So a group of we engineers, we thought that to design something which is an digital or an electronic stethoscope. And with all these kind of knowledge, whatever we have studied in electronics, a little bit on the domain knowledge of biomedical or medical. So we came out with an excellent piece of an electronic stethoscope. And this electronic stethoscope that we have given to the doctor. And initially they were so happy, but unfortunately the whole the product is being what is a failure, in the sense that nobody accepted it. The acceptance becomes a total zero. So then we started realizing is why it is so. And definitely it was not because of the function. Functionally, which we have designed an electronic stethoscope, which will be a far superior than whatever they have it as a stethoscope and wearing it. Far superior. It gives a perfect sound, and the doctors may be using one or two sound, but heart gives many sounds, and it used to capture many things, and it used to produce the signal presentation. Everything was perfect, but only one thing is that is a total failure. Then we started thinking about that. When we design such a good piece, why it is not being accepted? The basic idea, then we realized that we haven't talked to the stakeholders. Maybe the function wise it is beautiful, but the other features and aesthetics, so they were not so good and is not being accepted by the stakeholders, basically from the health workers, medical doctors, nurses, and all. So then we truly realized that just like in a human being, which itself is a lot of things that we can learn from nature, there are two things that is very important. One is an anatomy and another is the physiology. Anatomy is something which is a structure. And any organ, if you see that, there are two things that which we usually, the doctors and in the medical field, they teach us. One is the structure, basically anatomy. And the second one is the physiology, which is basically, it is a function of that particular organ or a group of organs. So similarly, in the design, there are two things that are very, very important, in my opinion, which I learned very hard. Okay, so one is the function. Maybe in this particular example, we as an engineer, we only captured the function and given to the doctors. But the second very important thing, which is an aesthetics. And the aesthetics, it not only the beautiness. Aesthetics, it usually comes about the features which makes them comfortable to use it. The stakeholders, the views that we haven't taken. And in my opinion, the design teaches the empathy. Empathy means we need to understand the other people's view who are using that. And this is the one very hard lesson for me that I have learned. And most of the time that we engineers or any professionals in that way, we use our own ideas to develop, design something and given to the other people. And if we are in a position to capture the views of others, that is the users and other things, those product or those designs, whatever you say, it would be very well accepted. So in my opinion, design teaches empathy. Look from the other sides and views. And apart from that, it fosters creativity that the teamwork is the beauty that it is being important. It also builds the confidence, because once you develop these kind of a product and it is being very well accepted, so you've built that kind of a confidence. So for me, in that way, the design education is very, very important, not only in the design per se, but the whole concept of the pedagogy, which you people develop in design, it has to be there in every education field. As a Vice Chancellor of the university, I would be very happy to introduce this kind of a different concept of the pedagogy, the curriculum, the way in which you learn, foster that kind of a creativity, and encourage the students to question it. And it has to be there in every academic streams. So in that way, today I'm very, very happy that to get all your feedback, so that some of these things that I can introduce and moving forward in the National Education Policy 2020, because in Manipal University Jaipur, there are about 50 different programs, academic programs. And if we are able to introduce a few of these concepts of design in every academic stream, I think there is a fun in learning. So design, in my opinion, is a fun in learning, because it is our own ideas that we try to put it. Sorry for talking a little bit more from the industrial and the product design, but this is how I understand and move forward. So I'll stop it here, Dr. Anuradha, and moving forward, depending upon the panels, let us see how it navigates. So slowly that we can also build that. And now I would be very happy and keen to listen to many others and also try to give some kind of an input from my end also. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Prabhu. Much appreciated. Thank you so much. I invite Mugdha ji to speak for a couple of minutes on your position on design. If you can hear us, please go ahead.
Yes, very thank you, Anuradha ji, for doing this, and very happy to meet some people online, as I happen to know Mr. Pradyumna Vyas ji and Dr. G.K.Prabhu ji. I'm very happy to have, of course, Madhura ji, and very happy to have heard Badrinarayanan ji and Geeta Narayanan ji and everybody else who's on the panel. So thank you very much, and my compliments to Manipal University for doing this as part of our Design Conclave, which was inaugurated by the Honorable CM yesterday on the occasion of the Sadbhavna Divas. So I'm very happy to say that at least in Rajasthan, there is some understanding of the concept and importance of design. Because for the last, and I think some bit of thanks should also go for my orientation with the likes of NID and Pradyumna during my tenure of 5 years in the Ministry of Commerce. So very, very grateful and happy to see everybody. So I will keep it very short because my understanding of design comes from the designing of government policies. And I think, there is a design to everything. I think Mr. Prabhu spoke about the design of the human body, and there is a design which also talks of a human-centric design. So it works both ways, right? God, as the divine creator, has designed this entire creation, and I think so there is a design element in everything. We also design our lives, we design our homes, we design our daily schedules. So the concept of design is inevitable, but it is almost like I said in the morning session, that it is almost like, like the way you breathe. It is so embedded in your lives that you are not able to distinguish it, and it's only bad design that you are able to recognize, and the good design is so embedded that it is very, very difficult to differentiate. But today we are talking, and I am not a design professional in the core academic sense of the term, but I think everything in life is run by common sense. Of course, common sense is very uncommon at times, but sometimes in the government more so. But that apart, see, design is fundamental. I said in the morning session also that everything is conceived before it is even, executed on the ground. So I think design becomes very, very fundamental. What we are doing right in terms of the academic part of it, in terms of the pedagogy, in terms of the methodology, I will add my 2 bits on it, and I will just, outline, because we have a lot of learned experts from whom even I'd like to learn. The first thing I realized is that in terms of government's interaction with design faculties and academia, there is no connect, at least at the state level, and there is no institutionalized mechanism of interacting with this entire cohort, which we have called a design cohort, which we have institutionalized in the Department of Science and Technology by making design as a domain of science. There's a science of design. Because when governments talk of policy making or taking out executive orders on converting buildings into green buildings, again, green is in inverted commas because sustainability and these are very, overawed concepts, I would say, overutilized and less understood kind of concepts. So when government is talking of building efficiency, I know I was working in RICO and I was one fine day asked that there's a big state level function happening. You have to do this, you have to declare and get a certification. So my idea is that when you are designing buildings, right, it is not just about the electricity that you are using, it is also about the sync of the building with the ecology of that area, with the environment of the area. If you are cutting a tree and trying to get a certificate for the building and say this is a green building or a sustainable building, you might get a certificate, you might end up getting a plaque or a logo or something, but I don't think conceptually it will be right? So my thing is that, one, there is no administrative department which can talk to the stakeholders of the design academia. At least I haven't seen it in the state. Which is actually, you are a stakeholder. See, there are about 12 institutions in Jaipur which do design for the last, I think, almost 20 years. And till last year, till we set up this design cohort, I have not seen that kind of interaction happening, because government is doing the maximum number of construction, be it hospitals, be it educational institutions, be it any kind of building. Right. So I think that concept of design needs to get embedded. So this two-way communication. Also, the thing is, sometimes we feel a little worry about learning from each other, which is not happening. We are working in silos. I think that silo needs to be broken in terms of what we are doing. Third thing is in terms of actual what you are teaching, because there was a small discussion which I heard when somebody said that should we teach according to what the industry requires. I think there needs to be a sync with what is the government's overall vision for the next 5 years, for the next 10 years, because technology and times and everything, our needs are changing. And COVID has brought this realization that things are happening much quicker, and it will be very, very difficult for institutions to swerve quickly to the kind of changes that are happening. So I think the policies, the courses, a lot of flexibility needs to be built. Institutions need to have autonomy, but when I say institutions need to have autonomy, you also need to have a body which can review what needs to go into the course curricula almost on an annual basis, because that is how the times are changing today. Also, are we able to incorporate the concepts of what is happening internationally? No. The other thing is, just like the government has institutions as stakeholders, the institutions also have the civil society at large as its stakeholders. Are we able to simultaneously educate the public? Because somewhere there is still in the mind of the general populace the concept about what does architecture do, what does design do. I think there is no clarity, and that is why this stream in terms of admissions into universities, college institutions is not really picking up, apart from premier institutions, minus a few premier institutions. The private universities are finding it very, very difficult to have a very inclusive kind of admission into their universities. One, because the entire stream of children studying in government or public educational institutions have no orientation during their school about a concept called a separate university or a separate examination which needs to be undertaken to enter into a premier design institute. So we're losing out on almost 75% of the crowd which can come from school into these premier design institutes, only for the lack of this reason that we have not exposed our children in the government schools to the concept of NID. The way people hear IIT frequently, people should hear NID and similar private institutions frequently. That is not happening. I think that is somewhere that we have missed out on it. So I think mass education, and because the learning curve is very steep, time is less, we will have to do it. Just to give you an example of what has happened in COVID is that today your requirements and designing of how public spaces, somebody also spoke about smart policy. When people come to me for smart cities, the idea about smart cities is confined only to signages. How do you pedestrianize the city? How does the traffic move in a city? How do you educate the public? Because we can't do top-down approach. We have to encourage the citizenry movement to own the idea of design and be comfortable with the idea of design. I think that is somewhere we are lacking, because in science and technology has taught me something, and I'll probably end with this and allow everybody else a chance to educate us. I think science and technology has told me that since we are at an incipient stage of building these collaborations between public and private, between private and government, and between government, private stakeholders, and also the civil society at large, and maybe also the journalists who write about these subjects, they really don't know even how to write good articles on conservation projects or things that students are doing. Your PhDs or your body of work that you do in the city is not flowing into the government policy making. Why is there a disconnect between that? I think there are a lot of things. We are not in sync. We are all working in silos, and these islands of individual existence need to come down so that we can all collaborate and be in sync with the common objectives. Somewhere also, I believe that when you are educating people, this concept of student internships, which we have done in science, to expose the children to what the government is doing, how policy making is happening in government, is very, very important. Because ultimately you don't want people to acquire a degree and then not get employed, and self-employment is how I see the future to be. So I think these are my little tidbits on
my own exposure and experience to what is happening in the design cohort. And design cohort is not just fancy events, not just fancy designing of logos and concept. The event is good for raising awareness, but you need to have a body of substantial policy architecture which institutionalizes this concept and breaks these barriers, break these silos in which we are working. And I think for that, policy advocacy by all of you who are in this panel today with the government, and repeat it. I would say that we are all at different stages of understanding in the government and in the private sector. So let the policy advocacy be like osmosis from higher level to lower level, irrespective of who's at the higher level, be it the private institutions or the academia or be the government. I think that kind of exchange and a consistent exchange, to orient ourselves in the government is very, very fundamental before we can even jump on the bandwagon of how tenders need to be redesigned, how RFPs need to go, including this concept of design. Because everybody today thinks that, including design as a concept would mean spending extra. Civil engineers think that they are architects themselves, they don't need any designing concept. I think that kind of fungibility, that kind of acceptability needs to happen in the everyday working of things. That is my 2 bits. I think I may have taken a little bit of time.
No, thank you, Mugdha ji. No, I mean, it's all well taken and much appreciated. Thank you so much. We'll come back to a lot of the points that you made. Can I now invite Professor Pradyumna Vyas to talk about your position for a couple of minutes? Professor Pradyumna, if you can hear us, please go ahead.
Hear me now? Yeah. Thank you very much. In fact, it is my honor to share such eminent persons on the panel, especially Mugdha ji, and it's great to hear from her. In fact, she has really drawn the boundaries of what kind of design education should be there, more or less that how can you connect with the policy framework and with the society. So let me just give you a little backdrop of design education, how it started and where we have to take it in today's challenging time. You see, the design education pedagogy was developed 100 years ago during the second industrial revolution. And it started with the Bahawas in 1919. And it was almost like form follows function. People were talking about design something which is a pleasant form, easy to use, easy to consume. And the whole idea of consumeristic way of designing objects, in fact, more on objects, this is what was happening in this whole assembly line, and all those things were there during this time of second industrial revolution. And a lot of economical development has happened on mass production and mass consumption. And it has started becoming a totally design centric. And that design centric is that a person is designing particular kind of collection, and this product is designed for Philip Stark, and it started pulling up in design ego, which is not connected with the society, but which started becoming a very expression centric. And that has led us into the wicked problem. And wicked problem is somewhere which we all see that what kind of harm on ecology, which is excessive consumption of energy and excessive consumption of product, which technology is enabler, and technology is just allowing you to do whatever you want to do without understanding the consequences. And I think this particular point has been dwelt upon, that what is the future of design education. I must say that NID model, I part of 30 years teaching and also being a director of NID, and the most beautiful model, I would say, was that learning by doing and learning from the field, what Mugdha ji was talking about. Are you connected with the society? And fortunately, it was not part of that time UGC or AICT or some kind of boundaries, and it was right from the beginning from Ministry of Commerce and Industry. They say that how institute can connect with the social and economic development of the country, and now environmental sustainability is the third aspect which is coming up. And the curriculum which was developed, which people are discussing now, and I am talking 1961, is that go and work with the society, not sympathy, but have empathy with, and look into what you can really do that. Take up the project. There is no textbook, just experiment. work with them, co-create, come out with the solution, test the prototypes, go forward. I think there is nothing like that. You have to have so many books and so many rooms and such kind of paper publications and all. What you are doing is online, or what you are doing is actually on field and trying to create impact. And I must say that the impact of design was directly measured by the project which was carried out in Javaja in Rajasthan itself, where the IIM and NID was involved, and also the project when Mugdha ji was also involved, which we did in Africa. And you see that immediately after 3 years, you see that what kind of social and confidence building impact has happened. So a couple of points I would like to mention about future of design is that it's a very complex area now. It is not a product centric. It is not really looking into only technology, what it allows you to do. But can you really build a scenario that where we are heading? Can you really look into the government policies where they are trying to head? Many times we say that my graduates or our graduate is industry ready. But I sometimes say that this is a very wrong approach to say that my graduate is industry ready, because industry want to produce and industry want to make a profit and they want to go ahead. Do really want to give you philosophy of consumption to the student? I think we need to shift our mind and say that we are developing graduates who will tell industry what is correct for them and what is not correct for them. I think that value analysis, unless we get into the whole education pedagogy, it is not going to really serve the purpose. Let us look the definition of design. It's a humanizing technology is design. That is one which was international definition which was created. The other definition is contextual use of technology is design. Now the context become very, very important. Which context you want to do it? Are you talking about a smart city? Are you talking about smart village? Are you looking into different scenarios and trying to address various things? I think what one need to align is that where do you want to take future scenario, say 20 years ahead or 25 years ahead? That kind of vision has to come out, where we want to take it, the quality of life, not only in our country, but also to the planet, what kind of inputs which we can do that. This sustainable development goal, people are talking, the 17 goals are there. Are we really bringing them in the classroom? I don't think so that people are really talking about. We are talking about the industry 4.0, where the IoT or robotics or your virtual reality and all technology you are talking about. Are we talking about society 5.0? I think one has to really look into what are you going to do with the aging population. Today is India is young country. 20 years after, there are going to be millions of people are going to be aging population. How are you going to look into the woman and child and gender equality? How are you going to look into water and food securities? I think these are a very complex issues which requires a systems thinking. And the design education, the biggest advantage is that it allows you to actually create the prototype. You can test the prototype in the field. Actually, the social science you will go, they can talk about the theory. They won't be able to make the prototype. And this prototyping and testing in the field is the thing which is stronger on design education, in design education, to connect it. So just to tell you that either or, it is not there anymore. Are we talking about the product based? Not necessarily only product. Are we talking about system? Yes. Are we talking about policy? Yes. Are we talking about philosophy and research, design research? Yes. We are talking all parameters of design which we can think of. Just to tell you that what is the designer's 4-5 stages which are there. And I would just like to articulate is the different stages which we can take it. And institutions, not necessarily all institutions have all of them. Few institutions have some and few institutions have other. The top level comes is design as a philosopher, and philosophy is where the research part is coming, future scenario is coming. You are looking into that where technology is going to lead it. The situation is like that. It's so disruptive technology, that the children who are in primary school, their jobs are not ready yet. When they will go up to 20, 25 years of age, the new jobs will be there. Today, if you say that I want to make my son as a radiologist or daughter as a radiologist, radiologists will be totally redundant after a couple of years in the Internet of Things. So this is such a disruptive time. I think you have to prepare students who can deal with ambiguity. Unfortunately, education program is very answer centric. It is not ambiguity centric, and we have to create students and pedagogy so that they can really deal with ambiguity. So the top layer is the philosophy, scenario building, design research, investigating into future, is investigating into unknowns. The second thing is the teacher, designer as a teacher. The teacher is who can understand that philosophy, who can visualize the scenario, and who can read all these philosophers' things and try and communicate in a very holistic manner to the students. And the third part comes is designer as a designer, who can perform, who understand what is the design philosophy, what is the design teaching, and whatever they have learned from there, they demonstrate, they take up the project and they demonstrate. Not necessarily each design teacher has to be a designer, but the designer has to perform, designer has to create something. Another level of design comes is designer as a craft, has a huge creative culture industry, and design schools have to connect. Jaipur has Institute of Craft and Design, and there is so much of skilled people are there. And sometimes I feel, have we really taken advantage of these people who are so skilled, generation after generation? Have we brought them into the mainstream of design profession and allowed them to look into that? They understand material and so well. Look at the people who are working in ivory, and the micro millimeter they can think about because the fine micro understanding is there. Ivory is banned. What are these guys are doing? Can we really look into and bring them into the design institution who can be an asset in a micro chip design or some such kind of thing? I think we need to identify people who exist to bring them into the classroom and teach the people. Talk about is design as a technician who understands the technology, who can demonstrate on the technology, whether it is complete visualization, because the moment you are creating scenario, 3D rendering, virtual reality, you need a very high level of technicians who can teach students. So these all are required, from philosophy, technician. These are the layers which requires the education. Education has to deal with ambiguity. I don't really, since NID, we never came across this AICT or UGC because it was offering diploma. We had complete freedom of experimentation, complete freedom of curriculum modification. So I don't know what situation other design schools feel, but yes, element of experimentation, element of co-creation, working with different people. And unfortunately, what happened in design conferences and design panel discussions, designers are talking with designers. I think we should talk, veterinary doctor should come, or the police person should come, or administration is already, Mugdha ji is there, but I think different discipline people should come who are engaging with the society and tell about their experience and let it come into design education. I think then it will make worthwhile connecting with the society and fulfilling the objective of Society 5.0. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Professor Vyas. Great words. Can we also hear from Professor Sanjay Srivastava? If you are here and you could hear us, please go ahead and speak for a couple of minutes, please, on your position.
Yeah.
Then we can start.
Thank you,
Hi.
Anuradha. First and foremost, I thank the entire team who have got this exciting webinar together. And thank you for inviting me to share my insights. We have discussed a lot on the type of education and the systems and the policies that we need to know and have it in India. But the other side of the aspect is whether the young mindsets are ready to accept it. What my side of a presentation is to address the issues of whether the students or the future students that they're going to be ready for taking in the design education in India. So the word that I've coined is detoxifying the present mindset of current students. And I come from a place which is called Bihar. And this place predominantly is the mindset is a IAS, a engineer, or a doctor is this. So the concept of a design as a career option, or a design as a platform where people have to experiment, the whole gamut of things that are available is very few. Now, I would take you to a couple of life examples, just to emphasize why every design institution has to work towards creating and igniting those mindsets, so that we actually, whatever we are talking about, can be utilized very well by the young generation, which is on the hold, and really take India to the next level of the design aspirational value. It was in 2008 when NIFT Patna was just started breathing out its initial design thoughts, and we were approached by the Department of Industry to discuss a case study where the hospital bed sheets were supposed to be given a design element, and they wanted to ensure that the bed sheets should be changed every day. And what was the design element that could come into that? And the team which was there, instantly we said rainbow, and there was a small element to it where 7 colors, 7 days of a week, and we had strips colored by these 7 colors, and that's there. The weaver community is doing the entire stretch of manufacturing the entire bed sheets with those 7 colors, and that's there in the hospitals today across all government hospitals, and the sheets are known as Satrangi chadars. Now, this is something which was happening in the systems, and then within the another 20 days of NIFT Patna coming into Bihar, where the first design school was coming up into this region, and within this 20 days of its existence, we were given another assignment to do a tableau for the Department of Industry. It was a huge task, new students, new set of faculties, new establishment, and we took up the challenge just to see that the community at large, the young minds at large, starts understanding the essence of design. Yes, there is a chart, there is an area, there is an opening, and what Mugdha ma'am was actually telling, that where the connect between the institution and the population which are into the 2-tier, 3-tier, and the villages, are we really approaching and touching them to come forward? Now, within this concept, when we did this, the kind of approach that we got and the kind of response that we got in terms of the younger generation who was into your 8th, 9th, 10th, or 12th, or aspirants of design schools then, has increased tremendously over the last 10 years of existence of a design school in a place which is not industry developed, and the kind of the mindset, the change that we are doing in terms of the equations that we are changing in the parents, the community at large, to understand that the design is an important platform which can be experimented and explored, and it gives you all the personal and professional values that it can have. Now, the kind of platform that we have discussed and the kind of understanding that all panel members have been sharing, the details is not actually filtering down to the masses, where we can have excellent mindsets who can be roped in. As sir was telling, Pradyumna sir was telling, that we need to identify those minds who can actually use this system. So the detoxifying of the entire mindset in terms of the current population, and make them move towards the design schools and understanding that yes, the design is something which is great. And today, with post in the pandemic area and the kind of space and the space design that we are trying to do with the virtual reality and the systems, and we are incorporating all those things into our curriculum, I think that's the way ahead. And I think we have a lot of to achieve, and we have plenty of things at our hands. And when we come from regions like Bihar or West Bengal or this eastern segment, which is not very design centric, connecting with the weavers, the artisans, the handicraft, and the handlooms, which can the design schools talk about and take it to a bigger platform. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Srivastava. That was great, really good and fabulous, position statements and arguments from all our panelists. But before we go into any kind of more of a discussion format, which will be more open and unstructured, it's actually very important to hear, because you're all coming from different walks of life, different generations, different disciplines. So I think, at least what has been covered so far is that very, very carefully is that to get the diversity of voices and experiences and multiple stakeholders from national and private institutions as well as government stakeholders, but perhaps not yet society at large, which Professor Pradyumna also touched upon. Our speakers talked about the regulatory atmosphere in the country and the secure the future of design. Our speakers have talked about inclusive design, so it is not something elite, but is of interest to everyone. So this idea of building awareness. Our speakers have also talked about the idea of empathy in design and the idea of acceptability, but also not think of design as industry ready, but also taking on the challenge to kind of teaching the industry what the industry needs. Dealing with ambiguity in experimentation, as Professor Vyas talked about, is something quite, I think, most of the panelists are talking about. And specifically this last point about detoxifying about design is actually really, really important. It's very hard to kind of summarize, and I mean, because his presentations have been exceptional. I'm going to maybe just throw in a few prompts, and I'm hoping that the last 10 minutes of this panel discussions, because unstructured, and so feel free to kind of put up your hand and speak if you wish to. Which is not, please do not wait to be invited to speak. One of the things that always crossed my mind, and I think you all have touched upon that, the panel members, and perhaps to design institutions and designers at large, is can design be critical yet profitable? Can design be political yet functional? So I'm just hoping that somebody will like to kind of talk to this particular. If you want to just raise your hand or just unmute and speak, please go right ahead.
Anuradha, I'm not so sure that I will speak about your prompt in the oppositional way, or one or the other. It's a continuum that is drawn between that. But I think that what concerns me about design education is we are all talking about it so there has been, over all the panelists, there has been fire, there has been passion, there has been a need to stick in, particularly when I was listening to Pradyumna in his last presentation, about the tremendous scope and the breadth of the vision that he presented across so many different sectors and so many different disciplinary areas, bringing the veterinarian or the policymaker in and so on. But I think that fundamentally what we need to understand, and it goes to the comments made up by Mrs. Sinha also about schools and bringing people into design, there is still a lack of real appreciation that this is a profession and it has a practice just like in architecture and everywhere else. And I think that we therefore need to understand that we need to move beyond taking these polemic positions to moving into saying that we are a community, we are here, we have of so many years as a record of doing something. It's an honorable practice to be in, pay us, treat us with dignity, have a fair regulatory process, but do not remove from design the autonomy it needs to be interdisciplinary, multidisciplinary, problem solving, and reaching out. And I think that came through almost everybody's voices today, is the breadth, the scope, the fire, the passion. We're here to stay in the long run, but can you please also make sure that we have been treated as professionals? Because design education without designers being treated as professionals, being paid a fair wage, there are many aspects of design education. After you produce a designer, then what? So I think that we have to take it as an ecology and not just as the curriculum in the classroom.
Say any
I think her. Yeah. Any other panelists want to say something? Dr. Anuradha's voice is breaking, I think. So.
Yeah, no, I would come because Geeta is very passionate about taking, and I'm a great admirer. You know that the time after NID, I don't know, it's 30 years now. The Srishti school started around 30 years, so it's a school. And when design was not so known, Geetaji has started a school, that too in a multidisciplinary environment, and she's most of the time talking about that acceptance at the policy level and how you can empower the complete pedagogy and autonomy of the institution to take forward. It's not that the education there is lack of understanding, but how to really take across this point is always coming time and again. And I think Mugdha can help is that how we can connect it with the government in some kind of coordination activities. Uh, uh, I was heading this India Design Council for almost 10 years, and design education was one of the major agenda for lobbying, that we cannot really compare with the type of engineering education deliveries there, how flexibility in curriculum, how experimentation in curriculum, all those aspects are there which require some policy framework, and giving some kind of like an NID. There was almost like the craftsman was coming and teaching into the postgraduate level, and we always treated them as a professor, even if they did not have any kind of formal education, but their work was really giving that kind of importance, and that never came as PhD is required to become the professors, not necessarily. So I think that kind of, and also when it architect
I think connectivity problem.
those aspects are coming up. Sorry, or the ATM machine which you are putting it up. Has there ever been considered the environmental designer is looking into those and the clearances required from them, architectural plan or not? I think those policies of integrating the developmental activities with the design interface will empower the profession, and will certainly be giving the power that they are a part of the developmental activities. And more we integrate in terms of at a policy framework, the better it would be for holistic development of social and sustainable. That is the way I would look at it, because there are issues in sustainable development goals. If you see, it has a similar agenda. The government has an agenda of power, gender equality, sustainable, like cities. Everything is where the systems thinking required, design thinking required, and can we really bring this an integral part of this development policy making? I'm sure automatically the importance of institution and government, institution and industry, institution and society linkages will become stronger.
Thank you, Professor Vyas. Can you hear me? Am I audible?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Professor Srivathsan, did you want to say something?
No, I was one Geeta said now, and even in the earlier, and respond to what is currently in discussion with the NEP. After many years of stifling regulatory frameworks, even institutes like CEPT sometimes face those difficulties. I find NEP autonomy. It is utilized. Curriculum, etc., is only one part of it. It's a larger ecology, as Geeta indicated too. And without those institutional arrangements and regulatory support, and also the economics of education, which often gets missed out in the conversation, and certainly NEP doesn't say much about it when it comes to private institutions. So all said, to me, I see a possibility now to rework something or do whatever we were doing better, because the promise of the new policy is to give far more autonomy to institutions, and I hope it will be carried through. And once that is done, then it's up to the institutions to do well what they promised to do and wouldn't have any other excuses to offer. So I quite agree with Geeta that the following conversations be anchored within what the NEP promises or doesn't promise.
Are there any more comments on the? I think one of the questions from one of the panelists was observation was design does not form a part of the policy. Its only mention is under design thinking. Are there other panelists? Do they want to comment on this a bit more? Or Professor Srivathsan, did you want to add to that? And
Yeah,
anybody?
I think architecture is a bit luckier in that sense. So there is an explicit reference to it.
Yeah.
Of course, but that doesn't mean that it has been addressed. See, there are two things. It's only relatively speaking that you mentioned. I would not so much worry about architecture, at least. Bodies to take a back seat and only offer professional standards as a sort of a guideline and a framework, and do away with the inspection Raj and input-based assessment. Then some of the institutions are better positioned to take wings and fly.
Does anybody else want to comment on that? Professor Prabhu, did you want to comment on that?
No, it is a very interesting topic, and when Geeta Madam spoke about some points, I can understand the pain in her voices, because in my earlier association that we worked very closely, and only one thing that is too much structure, especially when it comes to the university setup. If you standardize everything, because one of the panelists also said, if it is too much structure, if it is too much standardized, I think we systematically kill the creativity. And creativity is really a real sense of design education. So in that particular aspect, in my opinion, the flexibility has to be there. And I always used to, whenever there is a change in the curriculum which happens in the university, I always used to give about 4 points to all my faculty, students, the regulatory and all. The first one is it has to be a competent one. The second one is there must be relevancy, whatever we do. The third one is flexibility. And the fourth one, there must be fun in learning. So if you put these 4 components, and whenever we design the curriculum and put our effort in the delivery, so that would be a real nice thing to do it. And sometime if I see the NEP, of course, on the design education, of course, it did not speak a lot. I agree. But now it is left to the institution and universities like us. If there is a flexibility is given, so let us try to introduce at our level, whatever it is a possibility. Okay, so when I compare, see, I compare sometime with an engineering education with an architecture education. And if you say that if it is an engineering, it is too much monotonous. we give a lot of didactic lectures. And then the examination is also, it is a memory based. But when you compare, at least in the architecture and in the design education, to some extent, there is a creativity is already inbuilt. Of course, there is, we also think that it can be enhanced. But definitely, there are some of these inputs are really important for an university or for my position in the university to implement in every stream of the education. So this is something that it is a very interesting and takeaway for me. And now I leave it at this particular stage. And Dr. Anuradha, you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I'm sure there are more questions that are coming to mind, but in the interest of time, and also because we've probably spent a lot of time in front of the screen all day today, I wouldn't. I think that there's no point in doing a summary. I would request and invite Dr. Sampath Kumar to kindly deliver the vote of thanks to our panelists for a fantastic discussion.
Thank you, Professor Anuradha, for giving me the opportunity here. Now, first of all, I thank Mrs. Mugdha Sinha, AAS Secretary, Department of Science and Technology, Government of Rajasthan, for taking this initiative and bringing in all the people together. I thank Professor Srivathsan, Professor Badrinarayanan Srinivasan, Professor Geeta Narayanan, whom I'm seeing after Professor G.K.Prabhu, Professor Pradyumna Vyas, and Professor Sanjay Srivastava, also who was my colleague, and I'm seeing after a long time, to be the panelists and give their views on design education. I thank Professor Anuradha Chatterjee and Professor Madhura Yadav. Actually, they worked day and night for about 3 to 4 days to bring in all the panelists together and then make this grand. Then both the teams of DS and MUJ, their need for appreciation for their background work done on the entire week. Last but not the least, the gathering which has come here today from different regions of the country, I really welcome them and I thank them for making this a grand success. Thank you, one and all. Thank you.
Thank you.